Next, Ronn Owens on KGO.
Good morning, Ronn Owens, KGO. A lot of news. I want to touch also on that last story that John did, a $1,000 fine. We'll discuss that later. I wanted to open up with something we have not talked about, and yet it's so very, very important. India has a new prime minister, starts tomorrow, and it's a big shift as far as the country is concerned. So we call on Gunjan Bagla. I hope I pronounced that right. And this is the gentleman who's the founder of a company that advises people on investing. They have clients, and do you invest in India? And I appreciate you coming on, Gunjan. The key thing that I understand is this is huge for the United States. This is going to help us when it comes to trade, correct?
Absolutely, Ron. We expect to have much greater opportunities for American companies to sell their products and services in India. We also expect greater opportunities for American companies to source services and products from India.
Well, why? What was it down? I mean, were there tougher regulations and they're going to be overlooked, or how is that?
Okay, so first of all, the news has been good over the last 10 years where India and the U.S. have expanded their trade quite a bit. Mm-hmm. India went from being the 22nd largest trading partner to the 12th largest trading partner to the U.S. Last year. However, we think that there's an opportunity to go up to the top 6 or 7. Which means that trade could increase from about 98 billion today to about 500 billion in about 5 to 6 years. And these have big implications to California companies such as Google and Cisco and the Walt Disney Company. So it will strike home right here in California.
But what will be different? I mean, is it going to be easier to get companies to go there? Is it going to be easier for them to operate within India? Are regulations going to be dropped? How do you shoot up like that?
Yeah. So there's two things happening. First of all, in the last 5 years, bureaucracy and regulations have mired many American companies who wanted to do business in India. And Mr. Modi has a track record in the western state of Gujarat of clearing all of that logjam and creating tremendous growth in the state of Gujarat. And so the hope is that he will be able to bring that CEO level kind of expertise to the center, to the capital, Delhi, and apply it across the 28 or 29 states of India today.
That makes sense, but if he was doing that well in Gujarat, what was he doing different from the rest of the country?
Well, he ran a very tight ship. He ran a ship that was essentially largely free of major corruption, which has been a problem at the center and in many other states. And he also ran a ship where he took decisions that could be trusted. The previous government in India vacillated a lot on many issues. So that caused investors to sit on the sidelines because they weren't sure what India would do next.
What about
all of that is going to go away?
Well, what about the question of outsourcing? I mean, there are people who are saying if we're going to do more and more business with India, does that mean jobs are going to be outsourced? And if so, is that good for us or bad for us?
Yeah, that's a great question, Ron, and I think it's one of the great misconceptions that gets promulgated in media. There's a vibrant trade in services, about $30 billion, but there's only a $7 billion deficit. American companies are selling American services to India in a big way. Right in San Francisco, Bechtel Corporation at one time had 3,000 engineers working on an oil refinery in India. So, yeah, there'll be more outsourcing, and I would venture to say that makes companies like Google and Cisco and the Walt Disney Company more profitable in the U.S.
But what about the people who work for those companies?
Sale of American services to India, and that's good for American jobs.
Well, what are we selling to them? What will increase there?
Yeah, so all of the high-end services, the top architects in America are greatly desired in India. The top engineering firms, such as Bechtel, whom I mentioned a minute ago, can help build bridges and large factories and major infrastructure projects. Companies such as Westinghouse Electric that builds nuclear power plants, they're hoping to build a power plant at 4,000 megawatts, in fact, in Mr. Modi's home state of Gujarat.
Do me a favor. Hang on. I want to ask you some more questions, more in the political vein, okay?
Sure.
All right. We're talking with Gunjan Bagla, and he is a gentleman who he helps clients who want to invest in India. It's going to be a huge, huge new thing because the government is going to be far more friendly when it comes to commerce. I want to ask about the politics of it, too, politics/religion in that election. India, largest democracy in the world, they concluded their election. And by the way, the losers accepted it with class. I got to ask him about that, too. Anybody who does business or is from India or anybody who has concerns about what's going on there, I know it's not everybody, but for those of us who are into international affairs, this is huge. Big, big shift. Feel free to call in. 808-0810, that's our number, 808-0810. I'm Ronn Owens. This is KGO. It is 912. Ronn Owens, KGO Radio. We're talking right now with Gunjan Bagla, and he's a gentleman who arranges clients that do business in India. Major election. Think of this. 800 million people voted. They cared enough to vote in the election in India. We could learn something from that, couldn't we, Gunja?
Absolutely. And I think it's also important to note that the election was completely electronic. No paper ballots, no hanging chads. The results were counted in one night.
Was this much of a huge victory expected, though?
The signs for the BJP, Narendra Modi's party, being victorious had become quite apparent in recent weeks. But Indian opinion polls are notoriously inaccurate, and even exit polls didn't predict the extent of the victory. Out of 6 major exit polls, only 1 even came close.
By the way, are you somewhat prescient? Because in 2010, you told Business Week that the actual trade with India could go from 18 billion to about 80 billion in 5 years. Did you know something that everybody else didn't know?
I think I was just reading the data like I should have and like anybody else could have. And when I say now that it'll go to 500 billion, some people think I'm crazy. I'd be happy to come back on your show 5 years later and see where I stand.
Sounds good to me, but let's talk a little about the election itself. Here in the United States, you say, well, it was all on the economy. What about the religious aspect? Because the Hindu party had a lot to do with Modi's election, no?
Well, the election really amounted to, something similar to Bill Clinton in 1992. As you said, it was the economy is stupid, and that's really what people want jobs, they want the freedom to grow their businesses, and that's really what the vote came down to. People who oppose Modi often talk about the fact that he's from the Bharatiya Janata Party, which has strong Hindu roots. But when the BJP was in power from 1999 to 2004, they didn't do anything particular to favor the Hindu majority of India. In fact, the Muslim minority, the Zoroastrian minority, the Buddhists, the Jains, all thrived within the BJP's regime in those 5 years. And likewise in the state of Gujarat, for the last 10 years he's been the chief minister. I cannot point to any particular legal action he's taken or anything particular after the Hindu-Muslim riots of 2002 that his government has done, which has favored Hindus in particular. He's really favored development, and he's favored economic growth. And above all, that's what 700 million poor people in India who earn $2 a day or less really need.
Now, this comes into they told me I was gullible and I believed him question, but John Oliver had a bit about the Indian election on his program, and he's a friend of the show, and he talked about one of the promises Modi made, or one of the goals he had, is to have a toilet in every single house. Is that true, or is that just a comedy bit?
Well, not quite. There is a definite problem in the urban slums of India as well as in the villages of India. And the way that people often represent it today is India has more cell phones than toilets, and that's true. So it wasn't entirely in jest. I think having access to good hygiene, having access to good basic health, being safe from malaria and tuberculosis are important needs for the poorest 700 million people in India. And I saw that, John, that segment, and I found most of it was really valid.
Well, it was pretty good when they used techniques that they use here, yelling at each other and things like that.
Yeah.
One last question, though, and it involves the politics. What impressed me was the class with which the losing party, the Congress Party, just accepted the vote. You don't really, it was genuine. At least it appeared to be actually genuine, not the stiff kind of, okay, I lost type of thing that you get in the United States. Is that unusual?
Well, India has a long democratic tradition, right? So this is not a new democracy. Elections have been held, since the country was formed in 1947, and people generally do not challenge the ballot overall. In the last 15 years, the elections have been quite contentious, but when it's all over and done, people go back to business. It's not to say that they are not rivals, but there's no issue about, hey, this was an unfair election.
Forgive me, one last question I do also want to ask. In terms of international relations, obviously the United States has got some problems as far as Pakistan, Osama bin Laden is concerned. Has that changed the relations, tilting us more towards India?
Yes, I think that's a very important point, Ron. India is the largest free country in that part of the world. You know, we have Japan as an ally, but beyond Japan, if you look at Asia, you know, you consider China, which is a totalitarian country. You look at Pakistan and Afghanistan and Iraq, and things are not looking very rosy there for the U.S. The U.S. and India have a strong interest in aligning their strategic needs and their military needs. Should there ever be a confrontation with China, India is the one friend in the region that the United States will absolutely have to depend on.
You could almost say, though,
the BJP victory bodes well for this.
I was going to say, you could almost say, frankly, the loser in the election was China, because there's going to be a lot more business done with India, and then China loses it.
In fact, I'm looking at a Forbes magazine story here with exactly that headline.
Oh, well, I didn't see the headline. I just asked the question. Anyway, Gunjan, I very much appreciate your coming on. It's an important election, and I thought we ought to cover it, and you did a great job. Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much.
All right. That is Gunjan Bagla. If you want to continue, I'd love to talk about it. I know it's not the top of everybody's head, but what the election in India showed is a lot of things. The bottom line is it's good for the United States, it's good for people who work in the country, and it's good for investment. So when you have a country as large as India, it makes a big difference in the world. If you have some thoughts, by all means, please feel free to call 808-0810. I'm Ronn Owens. This is KGO at 922. With a great number of Indian Americans and people from India living in Silicon Valley and working there, thought you might wanted to hear about the election, which we just talked about. Ravi wants to talk about it, too. Ravi's in San Jose. Hey, Ravi, good morning.
Hey, good morning, Ron. Is Mr. Gunjan still on the line?
No, he's not. He had to leave.
He's not. Like he was asking, he was saying is that the outsourcing will help us. In which sense he was talking that it will help us?
I think he was looking at it from the standpoint of a business. Don't forget, he advises businesses on how to invest in India, so I presume that's what he was doing.
I know, but, you know, the people thousands of them are coming over here and taking the jobs from our children over here, and we are outsourcing everything. So that's what I want.
But I thought the trend was starting to shift. From what I've read, the trend is slowly starting to shift. There are companies that have been in other countries that are pulling back and coming back to the United States because of, for example, tax deductions that are given to companies. Take a look at, for example, Twitter here in San Francisco. By making it much more user-friendly, the company hires more people from the United States.
Okay, well, if that's the thing, I hope it will help us in, for our children over here.
Oh, I understand. I mean, it's one of the most emotional things you can talk about because I've read pros and cons when it comes to outsourcing, and they tend to balance each other out. But when you look at it on a human level, in other words, an individual who loses his job and winds up having that job being taken by somebody in another country, it doesn't seem as level a playing field, does it?
Exactly. That's what I wanted to hear from him. But again, thank you very much, Ron.
You're very welcome. Look, I think the way it balances out, though, is what I just said. Twitter is a perfect example. If you induce companies to come to a particular area in California or in San Francisco, or for that matter, just the United States itself, you can have companies that come over here because the tax rates in whatever the country they're coming from might be significantly higher. And if that's the case, hey, that says something. It's all a matter of bottom line on this. Part of the problem, though, is that we're becoming so thoroughly technically sophisticated that there are a lot of jobs that are just going to disappear. And you wonder what's going to happen with the people who fill those jobs. But every time I bring that up, somebody will point out we had these same fears when the Industrial Revolution came about and when all of a sudden manufacturing came about the way it was done on a regular schedule. So consequently, there always seems to be a vacuum that can be filled. I don't know. The future is It's too difficult to call. I think we're at a point now where we take it year by year. The important thing as far as India was concerned is that we've always had good relations with both India and Pakistan. In the last 5 years or so, that has shifted a bit. We have great relations with India, but as far as Pakistan is concerned, they're not crazy about us. We're not crazy about them because we are trying to do what we can to defeat al-Qaeda, and that often means crossing the border from Afghanistan to Pakistan. They correctly feel it's their territory. They should have more of a say. We're upset with them because of the Osama bin Laden thing. They're upset with us the same way. We're upset because we feel that they've actually sheltered Osama bin Laden. And they're upset because they felt we moved without asking any of them if it was okay. Now, from a standpoint of an American, I'm sorry, you got to side with the way we're thinking, not their thinking. But that makes a big difference when it comes to India itself. It's a major country, one of the largest countries in the world, and this election is huge. By virtue of this election, this is a guy who ran and said, hey, I like the United States. I want to do business. that can only help everybody. In the long run, it can only help everybody. So I'm delighted with what happened in India. And like John Oliver, I know it's not really been covered much, but it's major if you look at it from the standpoint of the world itself. Having said that, when we come back after the news, I got to ask a question about this Petaluma construction company that got the fine. I also want to talk a little bit about a place in Michigan. Oh, you're not even allowed to curse. Isn't that infringement on your right to speak? Well, we'll figure that out together. I'm Ronn Owens. This is KGO. How about some news? You're heading towards 9:30, and for that, here's Jennifer Jones-Lee.